Welcome back to College Football Addiction, a Rose Bowl preview, and kind of a classic Rose Bowl here with a former Pac-12 team and a Big Ten team, now two Big Ten
RIP.
teams,
RIP Pac-12.
a Pac-2 at this point, right? So, Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football and Locked On Ducks. Man, how you doing, bud?
Doing great and just counting down the seconds,
Yeah.
days, hours, minute, everything just to give me the game already. Give
I
me
don't
Oregon. Oregon hasn't played a game in almost a month.
I
Been a
don't
long
think it's a
time.
hot take to say that this is probably could be right. Like we thought the first round might be better than it was. The best game of the playoff. I'm not saying this is the national championship, but I think this could be the best game of the playoff.
Yeah, I think it has that making, certainly. You talked about the brands. I think that, factors into how we view a game, after the fact. I mean, Oregon and Ohio State played a classic on October 12th, but I mean, there were plenty of college football games played amongst, Tuesday night Maction teams that were every bit as thrilling. But do we talk about that as the game of the year? No, it's because of the stakes. It's because of the brands. It's because of what both these teams have in their sights for the rest of the season. And I fully expect it to be close. I really do. I think it plays out similarly to how it did in the first matchup. It'll come down to all the classic cliches: third down, turnovers, special teams, execution, self-inflicted wounds, penalties. Like those feel like the key factors in this one. All of them, just all of them across the board, because you have two really good rosters, you have two really good coaching staffs. That's what it usually comes down to when you have these great teams. You think back to Ohio State almost beating Georgia in 2022 before Georgia went on to win the national championship against TCU. That game came down to, a couple of key moments. A 50-yard field goal. Ohio State makes that. Maybe Ryan Day has a national championship. Or Kirby Smart doesn't get that timeout in time before Ohio State executes a fake punt to convert a first down. That's what it comes down to. The Rose Bowl last year, Michigan and Alabama. Michigan wins the game. That's what everyone remembers. Do you remember that they had a 4th and 2 or 3 on their own side of the field on that game-tying drive at the end of the fourth quarter? And if they don't convert that, they probably lose the game. That's what this one feels like to me.
Yeah, so many classics that we've seen in the Rose Bowl. I was there for one of them with Winston and Auburn going at it, and obviously people think about the Texas USC. Like there have been so many classics. Last year, you mentioned the overtime game, and you mentioned like the small plays that people forget. Alabama had some drops. They had some chance. They had a fumble on the other side of the field.
There were special. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there were missed field goals going both ways, weren't there?
Yeah, could have absolutely either team could have stepped up and taken that. So you mentioned the first matchup, and I don't really buy into any kind of a revenge factor in this because if you're not motivated by the playoff, then get out and don't even play in this. But where is Oregon improved the most since that matchup, and where's the biggest area for concern? So maybe two-parter there.
Yeah, I think the biggest area for improvement, frankly, is the special teams. And, there was one play in particular that went Oregon's way that got them 3 points when, they were trying to squib the ball. It hits off the up man. Oregon recovers and steals a possession. But, they also had a missed PAT and then a missed 2-point conversion as well. So Ohio State's driving to kick a game-winning field goal instead of a game-tying field goal. Oregon also missed a field goal in that game, a 44-yarder for a guy who's only missed twice all season. So I think that's one area that Oregon has really, really been solid in across the board since that particular matchup. But I think the red zone has been a big emphasis as well. That's another one of those keys that you hear about in these big games, holding to 3, converting, to get 7. And that's a big reason that Ohio State was in the opportunity they had with less than 2 minutes to go in that game, because they were able to hold Oregon on a goal-to-go situation out of the end zone entirely. Dylan Gabriel made the wrong read, missed a wide-open guy for a touchdown, but Ohio State had held on a couple plays before that because their red zone defense has been really, really good. And then on Oregon's final drive, they, again, had goal to go. They settled for 3, and that was good enough to take the lead, but they weren't able to punch it in, which changes the dynamic of, the end of that game. So those are a couple areas that I think Oregon has emphasized and been much better at over the last several weeks since the October 12th matchup. But, the biggest area for concern to me for Oregon is the safeties. And the safeties have done a really good job, as they have every year under Dan Lanning and defense coordinator Tosh Lupoy, tackling, making plays, around the line of scrimmage. They were not good in the Big Ten championship game against Penn State, but in coverage, they haven't been great. They are not super rangy guys who are, sweepers or ball hawks over the top for an Ohio State offense that just showed you they want to push the ball down the field. Oregon hasn't had their safeties making a lot of those sorts of plays. And then in individual man-to-man coverage, they've been okay, but not great. So that's the biggest area where if I'm Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, I'm looking at Oregon's secondary and saying, okay, we've got 3 NFL wide receivers. They've got, 3 defensive backs that are good in coverage, Brandon Johnson and Nico Reed and Jabbar Muhammad, who are, Johnson's technically say he plays that nickel position called safety corner or whatever. It's just he's the nickel guy out there. But find a way to get your receivers to push the Oregon safeties. And I think that's how they find success down the field. Because I think overall, Oregon's outside corners have been really, really good this season. And certainly that doesn't mean Ohio State's receivers can't win those 1v1s, but that's the biggest area of concern I have is, Ohio State's taking these downfield shots, high arcing, looping passes down the field. Oregon hasn't had guys that, have been able to just make plays on the back end and feel like they take that away if it's not the corner. So that's number one. And then I'll give you a secondary one as well, just because it's definitely at the top of my mind. What's Oregon's defensive line going to do after getting bullied by Penn State's offensive line? This is an Ohio State offensive line. I picked Tennessee to upset Ohio State because I didn't like the matchup of their reshuffled, banged up offensive line against a nasty Tennessee front four. They played their best game of the year. Will Howard wasn't sacked. They ran the ball pretty well. They had time to take those downfield shots. I don't care if you have Deion Sanders in his prime in coverage. If you give a quarterback 4 seconds to throw, receivers are going to get open. So that defensive line's got to be able to create pressure for Oregon.
You talked a little bit about the Ohio State wide receivers. There's no doubt that these might be the 2 best wide receiver units in college football, certainly in the Big Ten and left in the playoff. How do you like the matchup of Oregon's side, which, I think Ohio State's wide receivers get a ton of attention. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith and some of the weapons they have are insane. Some of the weapons that Oregon has are pretty ridiculous too. How do you like their matchup against Ohio State's secondary?
Yeah, it was one of the questions I had going into the first matchup, but it's hard to not be confident about them going into this one with the way they performed. Now, Ohio State didn't necessarily make it easy all the time, but Oregon's wide receivers made plays, and Denzel Burke has been a really good corner the last couple of years, and he got cooked. Absolutely torched by both Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson. Tez for a long touchdown, Stewart for a touchdown and another long completion. I mean, they did a great job, and I presume Trayshawn Holden is not going to repeat his mistake of spitting in the face of an Ohio State player, because that's just Todd Blackledge had a great line about it when it happened. This is the game of the year. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And Oregon lost their number 3 receiver, had Justice Lowe step up. We haven't seen Justice Lowe. I'm pretty sure he's been banged up with an injury in the last few weeks, but that trio of Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, and Evan Stewart, any one of those guys can lead Oregon's receiver room in catches or yards in a given game. But all 3 have done it at some point this year. So, Tez is the go-to guy, to be sure. That's where Dylan Gabriel looks the most. But I think that Stewart and Holden is a 2 and 3. It's a really talented bunch. And in a way, it's kind of best on best, because you've got guys at the safety position like Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom. You've got Denzel Burke on the outside for Ohio State. Those are really good football players. And Oregon's receivers were just better. But, I think in a lot of ways that, came down to scheme. But, sometimes when you have great guys that can all play at the NFL level, some days this guy's going to be better. Some days that guy's going to be better. If you put, Scotty Scheffler and Brooks Koepka in a 1v1 match, probably 5 times Scotty's going to win, 5 times Koepka's going to win. It's just luck of the draw sometimes.
Yeah, and America wins by getting to watch it, much like on Wednesday. So
yeah, no, I've had the 2 dueling parts of me. On this side, there's the Oregon fan. Oh, please just win the game by 30. I don't want to. Then there's the college football fan of me. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah,
this is going to be Ohio State, Oregon, Rose Bowl rematch, quarterfinal. You got everything you need.
Hard to complain too much with what we'll get on Wednesday. Advantage at quarterback, it feels like, and Ohio State fans will cook me if Will Howard has a great day, but he was phenomenal against Tennessee, against a really good Tennessee defense that
Yes.
still kind of shocked that they put up the points they did. Everybody talks about Samson being out, some of the weapons being out for Tennessee. That's, those guys weren't playing D, right, against Ohio State's offense. But Gabriel's been more consistent, I think, this year, right? Like it feels like if there's an advantage there that maybe his legs could get involved as well a little bit, and that kind of gives Oregon a little bit of a leg up in that regard.
Well, yes and no. I don't know how big of an advantage it is. Situationally, it came into play for Oregon's final touchdown in the first matchup. They had a 3rd and 2, they run the RPO, and Gabriel has, a straight run really for the first time all game. I mean, he did all of his work in that one from the pocket. He had 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then the rushing score. But for the most part, he just sat in the pocket. He had time to throw. And he was slicing and dicing. That's what Will Howard did against Tennessee. We have not seen a game, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I have not seen an Ohio State game where Will Howard's legs felt like they were a big factor. And over the years, you've routinely seen coaching staffs wait for a big moment to pull out the quarterback's legs because they don't want to expose them to hits all throughout the year if they don't need to. But in a game like this, you're doing whatever it takes to win. I think of Justin Herbert in the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin 2019. He hadn't run all year. All of a sudden, they let him pull it out on the read option against Utah, and then against Wisconsin as well. So that was a change they hadn't seen. You knew the potential was there, but they just weren't doing it for this, that, or the other reason. And I wonder if Ohio State hasn't been doing that with Will Howard. He's not incredibly fast, but he can move.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a mobile enough guy. So I wonder if that's coming to play. Trevor Lawrence, 2019 against Ohio State. He ran a little bit throughout the year, but all of a sudden he's pulling off a 70-yard quarterback draw for a touchdown. So, yeah, Gabriel's the better runner of the two. I don't see this as a matchup where either guy is going to run, suddenly 15 times in a game, and you're going to see a Lamar Jackson or Haynes King at Georgia Tech sort of game where they're just doing a bunch of design quarterback runs. That's not how these offenses operate. I do believe situationally both offensive coordinators will have a couple of design quarterback runs ready to go.
It's going to be a fun one. Do you? We're just about 48 hours out at this point. Do you have a prediction in this one?
Yeah, can I flip a coin and then make my pick? Because that's really the way that I feel about it. I think it's going to be a great game. I think Oregon wins 31-28. 30-27. 30-27 in that sort of range. I think it's going to look very similar to the first game. It'll come down to who's better in a couple of key spots.
Yeah, this is, to me, the hardest game to pick. And in fact, that's not even close to me. But this is the hardest game to pick of the weekend. And that's exactly what we want. So, Spencer, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football Monday through Friday and Saturdays during the season as well, all year round on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm on Twitter at SMcLaughlinCFB if you want to hop in my DMs and tell me what a fool I am.
You can also do that down in the comments below. I'm sure the Ohio State fans will jump on.
Yes, indeed, you can. Go for it. I got rent to pay.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you so much for watching. If you appreciated, enjoyed, loved, or hated our video today, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of our content. We will talk to you soon on College Football Addiction.